Good morning, everyone. We're glad to have you join virtually for today's discussion. My name is Nathan Finney, President of the Canadian Cattle Association, and with my wife and 3 kids, we manage the backgrounding operation in Sackville, New Brunswick. I apologize for my attire. We were loading cattle here this morning, so you get the best part of me. I'd like to welcome you to join our dialogue with Ducks Unlimited Canada and Nature Conservancy of Canada. Today, we'll discuss how natural climate change solutions and sustainable food production in the beef industry can work together to protect biodiversity and help ensure food security for a growing population in Canada and around the world. We are not alone in this. This solution requires an approach that brings together farmers and ranchers, conservationists, industry leaders, researchers, and government. You will hear from each of these groups today. As beef farmers and ranchers, we have often been told that we need to get out and tell our story more. Over the past few years, we've stepped up to the challenge. 2 short documentaries that you will see today are prime examples of how cattle contribute positively to the environment. Cattle are part of the climate change solution. They help conserve biodiversity, preserve grasslands, store carbon, and provide a high-quality, sustainable, nutrient-dense protein that feeds millions of people every year here in Canada and around the world. Our industry is committed to the continuous improvement and sustainability of the beef sector. Through the 2030 beef industry goals, we have created ambitious science-based targets that provide clear messaging on how to improve the way cattle are raised and how to enhance the natural environment under the care of beef farmers and ranchers. I am always proud to say that Canadian farmers and ranchers raise some of the most sustainable beef globally. Canadian beef has a total footprint of less than half the world's average per unit of production, and there needs to be more, not less. Beef production from countries with the lowest emission intensity. This is one reason why CCA and other agriculture and environmental partners will be at COP28 this year in Dubai. Our experience and commitment to sustainable beef production needs to be part of global policy discussions, and we need to position ourselves as a solution provider. As farmers and ranchers, we see ourselves as primary stewards of the environment, and we take pride in protecting these landscapes. By working together with Ducks Unlimited Canada and Nature Conservancy of Canada, we can build on shared goals and prevent further grassland conversion and promote sustainable food systems. Thank you. I would now like to pass the mic over to Paul Thorogood, National Manager of Agriculture Sustainability with Ducks Unlimited Canada, to give his remarks. Paul has been with Ducks Unlimited Canada since 1997. He is a professional agrologist by trade, but he also owns and operates a farm near Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. In addition, Paul regularly serves on agriculture industry boards and working groups as both farmer and a Ducks Unlimited Canada representative. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you for the introduction, Nathan, and good morning, everyone. I'm proud to be here with our friends and partners from Canadian Cattle Association and Nature Conservancy Canada to co-host this important event. It's my pleasure to join you on behalf of our CEO, Michael Nadler, who is unfortunately unable to make it this morning. Canada and the world are facing unprecedented environmental challenges. The joint climate and biodiversity crises are impacting the planet now and will continue to impact it for future generations. Parallel to this and these environmental issues is a growing world that's demanding more food. And the UN estimates that the world will demand 60% more food by 2050. Some may view that meeting the demand for more food and protecting the environment are competing objectives. However, I and Ducks Unlimited Canada believe that it's absolutely critical for each of us to do our utmost to address both of these crises. Partnerships like this one, I believe that we can deliver both. Canadians' grasslands and the embedded wetlands are largely owned and stewarded by Canadian beef farmers and ranchers. And through generations of hard work, these precious ecosystems remain to provide habitat for both common and endangered species, to sequester carbon, and to produce healthy, nutritious food. And I want to emphasize a couple points that Nathan mentioned. In Canada, The land used for beef production represents only a third of the agricultural land, but supports 68% of the wildlife habitat capacity within the agricultural landscape. It's fair to say that Canadian beef benefits biodiversity. Similarly, Canadian cattle are produced with less than half the global average greenhouse gas emission per pound of beef. It's also fair to say that Canadian beef helps address climate change. As we head into COP28 and consider the implications of the recent COP15 hosted here in Canada, Ducks Unlimited Canada believes that nature-based solutions developed and delivered in partnership with all stakeholders, especially Canadian farmers and ranchers, are key to meeting the challenges before us. As we search for solutions to biodiversity and to climate and to a growing world demand for food, I encourage all of us to reconsider the role that grasslands and the people who steward them play in the sustainability of Canada's landscapes. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thanks, Paul. So if you look down our agenda, and as promised, we have two documentaries highlighting what it is we're doing as part of an industry and partners. So with that, I will introduce one of our short films, Guardians of the Grasslands. But just before I do that, following the film, we have Monica Hadarits, who is manager of the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and she will be following up after the viewing of Guardians of the Grasslands. So please enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Monica Hadarits with the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and I'm really looking forward to moderating our first panel on cattle production as a natural climate solution, really building off the documentary we just watched. It was really impactful for me. I think what a powerful documentary we just saw. We're going to really just, like I said, shift into the first panel. We have three esteemed panelists with us today, and I'll just set the stage with a little bit of background, and then we'll dive right in. So again, one of the world's most endangered ecosystems in the world can be found right here in Canada. There are less than 20% of Canada's grasslands remaining today. Canada's grasslands store 1.5 billion tons of carbon. They provide habitat for wildlife, including over 60 species at risk of extinction, and many other ecosystem services, as we just learned about. Between 2011 and 2021, approximately 1.5 million acres of grasslands were lost. And as we lose those grasslands, we also lose the many ecosystem services that they provide. However, grassland conservation and sustainable beef production, as we saw in the documentary, go hand in hand, working together. They can help us to adapt to climate change and address biodiversity loss, and also enhance food system resilience. So to kick things off on the panel, I would just like to ask each of the panelists to take a few minutes and share some of their initial thoughts on the documentary and on this theme in general. And after that, we will dive into a question and answer session. And I will just flag for those of you who are joining on the webinar, if you would like to ask questions, please use the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them. So first, I have the pleasure of welcoming Tom Lynch-Staunton. He is the Regional Vice President of the Nature Conservancy of Canada for the Alberta region. Tom grew up in nature on the family-owned Antelope Butte Ranch, an extensive cattle grazing operation on a primarily native rough fescue landscape in the southern Alberta foothills. Tom co-managed the ranch with his brother for 13 years until in 2011 he moved to Edmonton, where he has worked for the University of Alberta, the Canadian Cattle Association, and Alberta Beef Producers. Tom has sat on various councils and advisory boards, including the Edmonton Food Council, the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, I have the pleasure of working with him, and the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute. So Tom, I will pass the mic over to you. What are your initial thoughts on the documentary and its themes?
Well, thank you so much, Monica, and thanks for having me for this panel. And I've seen this film, oh, I don't know, probably 20 times, and every time it does hit me pretty hard, partly because of where I grew up, which was right close to the Waldron Ranch. And I think for me, there's really two things about the video that hit me very hard, and that we're actively working on at Nature Conservancy of Canada. And that's the continued loss of grasslands, with only, the video's a few years old. We're looking at new data that suggests we're even less than 20% of Canadian prairie grasslands left. And then the second thing is that, especially in the private land base of Canada, that it's when we lose ranchers and we lose ranches, we lose native grasslands and biodiversity. And it's really that simple. And that's why we and Ducks Unlimited and other land trust and environmental organizations have recognized that if we want to keep grasslands as an important ecosystem, we also need to keep ranchers. And so what can we do to partner, support, help ranchers continue ranching on the landscape?
Definitely, the two are inextricably linked for sure. Thank you for that, Tom. Next up, I have Tyler Fulton. He is the Vice President of the Canadian Cattle Association. Tyler is the third generation on his farm, and together with his wife and two kids, they own and operate Titan Farm Limited, south of Birtle, Manitoba. Tyler believes cattle farmers and ranchers play a unique role in Canadian agriculture by utilizing and protecting a natural landscape, the Canadian grasslands, while simultaneously growing food for the world. Thank you, Tyler, for taking the time to be with us today, and curious what your initial thoughts are on the documentary and its key themes. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I too have seen the video probably a comparable number of times as Tom, and it is always impactful. I think it really does a great job of showing the connection of ranching and the prairie landscape with all of its biodiversity in a way that that hasn't been shown in a great way before. What I wanted to kind of relay about the thoughts coming out of this is just how aligned ranching is with biodiversity and conservation habitat, because ranchers are spending most of their days out in that environment, on that landscape. We just have this innate appreciation for it and all of its minor, fine details. And it's so good, really, that successful ranching is so perfectly aligned with biodiversity, because we love it, the lifestyle, but the landscape, and appreciate all of the biodiversity that comes from it. So that's really the main thing that I wanted from a rancher's perspective to be able to relay to the meeting here. So thanks.
Excellent. Absolutely, alignment and the passion in your voice. You can hear the relationship that beef farmers and ranchers have with the land is so special. So thanks for that, Tyler. I would like to also welcome Parliamentary Secretary Adam van Koeverden, who will provide remarks on behalf of the federal government. Adam van Koeverden is the Member of Parliament for Milton and is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Sport and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. He is known for his dedication to public service and sports excellence. MP van Koeverden is a celebrated Olympic kayaker who has represented Canada at 4 Olympics, winning 1 gold medal, 2 silver, and a bronze. He is a first-generation Canadian and grew up at Chautauqua Co-op in North Oakville. Thank you so much for joining us today, Parliamentary Secretary. We'll hand it over to you to do some opening remarks from the federal government, and then we'll dive into your initial thoughts after that. So over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Monica, and thanks Tom and Tyler for your remarks and for kicking us off. And to everybody else who's joining today, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's just great to see the collaboration between conservation organizations, ranchers, and the industry to all contribute to climate and carbon solutions. All of our sustainability goals are aligned. I had a great meeting yesterday with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and Milton, despite what a lot of people think, is actually a rural riding. And I have a lot of great farmers. It used to be actually only 20 years ago, there was more horses in Milton than there were humans. But the 2000s were a time of quick growth for the Milton region. We still have a lot of farming and a lot of agriculture. We've got the beef block down in South Milton, which is where all the best local meat comes from. So I want to thank all of the farmers, ranchers, and cattle people who are here today. I just want everybody to know that Canada shares your interest in grassland conservation, given its extreme importance in addressing the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change. As has been said, grasslands are rich in biodiversity, and they play a really, really significant role in sustainable agriculture and our food security, and they're under threat. So we've got to make sure that we continue to acknowledge that the ranching sector plays a really, really important role. And certainly, if there wasn't a ranching sector, then there probably wouldn't be any grasslands left to this at this time. Losing grasslands, whether it's through development or any sort of conversion of land to any other means, means losing a lot of biodiversity. Plants and animals rely on those ecosystems for survival, and any of that development risks the release of significant amounts of carbon to the atmosphere for lots of different reasons through lots of different modalities. So grasslands, in particular, native grasslands, are the single most endangered ecosystem in Canada. And like some previous speakers have mentioned, and certainly the documentary put a finer point on it, climate change isn't this thing that exists in the Amazon rainforest, or just when we see these images of giant icebergs and glaciers calving. It's all around us. It's in our communities, and it affects us and our livelihoods and our lives in where we live. So it's important to recognize it's very, very local, and the impacts are significant in every ecosystem. So we are very eager as a government to continue to support nature-based solutions to restore and maintain, and certainly even enhance nature's contributions to our lives, our livelihoods, but also the fight against biodiversity loss and climate change. And we are playing an international leadership role in the promotion of nature-based solutions, and that'll help achieve our domestic climate goals, but also as we've seen, Canada leads the way in internationally, and that's a very, very significant role that Canada must continue to play, because we're only 0.5% of the global population. But domestically, here in Canada, at home, Canada is committed to using nature-based solutions to fight climate change and biodiversity loss. That includes our 2 billion tree program. I helped plant 200 trees last weekend in my community through that program. And over the next 10 years, that and other actions will work to conserve and sustainably manage and help to restore ecosystems. So the agriculture sector continues to play a really, really significant role. I want to thank everybody here who's contributed in such a strong and important way. And I'd like to thank the organizers today for taking the initiative to host this dialogue and to further the conversation on how we can continue to work together on grassland conservation and to meet all of our sustainability goals. Thanks for having me today, and looking forward to some questions.
Thank you very much, Parliamentary Secretary. Well, this is an excellent way to start off the panel. Very positive comments. So thank you, everybody, for getting us going. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Again, for the audience, we have, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. And for our panelists, if you want to just jump in and take a crack at the first question, do so. Otherwise, I can just call on you individually. So we'll see how it goes. The first question we wanted to address is, with grasslands being the most endangered ecosystem in Canada, what worries you the most in the next 5, 10, or 15 years as we try to address these twin crises that we've been chatting about with climate change and biodiversity loss? So what worries you the most? Does anybody want to kick us off, or I can?
I don't mind starting, Monica.
Okay, over to you.
I think it's the scale of what's already happened. I think that's what worries me the most, is that it's not as if we're starting, from scratch or anything like that. It's the scale of loss that's already occurred due to a variety of different, land conversion activities, I guess we'll call them. But the next 5 years are really, really important in how we act to quickly and effectively address the loss that is continuing to occur. And I'm actually really optimistic. I'm optimistic for a variety of reasons. I'm optimistic because ranchers and farmers in the agriculture sector always find solutions. That's just basically what farming's all about. I come from a farming family, apples, not cattle, but it's all about problem solving and staying on your toes and making sure you're there to address issues as they arise, whether that's a weather event or changes to the sector or the unavailability of a product that you rely on. I'm optimistic when I see collaboration, when I see Indigenous peoples and industry and conservation organizations and the sector and ranchers and government all coming together to find solutions to problems. And I'm very confident because all of our goals are the same. We want to see a happy, healthy, prosperous planet. And that's when our goals are aligned, our strategy should be too. So I'm optimistic, and I think it's also important to see the size of the goal when you're there. We know it's a big issue, so we've got to work in a concerted fashion in order to address the challenge.
Absolutely, Tom. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll maybe jump in and thank you for that, MP Van Koeverden. I completely agree. I mean, the scale of what's going on across the Canadian grasslands, that's what worries me the most. It's grassland conservation. It is expensive. And it takes, as you said, it takes now collaboration. It takes a whole of society approach to address this challenge. Partnerships like we have on the screen here, Canadian Cattle Association, us partnering with Ducks Unlimited Canada and other groups, and of course federal and provincial governments, and even municipal governments is what's going to take to solve this problem. I do worry about continued loss, of course, of grasslands. And one of the reasons is because even if you decide, okay, we need to start restoring grasslands, restoration is sometimes, it's very difficult on these native grasslands, but sometimes even impossible. And yes, it can happen, but once these lands are converted, it's very rare that we get them back to a native prairie. It can happen through a lot of patience and persistence, but that's one of the things that worries me the most. But I am optimistic, of course. Just like Adam, I do see the word is out across Canada about grasslands, an important ecosystem. It's sort of been an unsung hero for many years, and now people are recognizing that how important this landscape is. And so I'm optimistic that we will have many partnerships that will be able to help continue the conservation of grasslands. And the other piece I'm optimistic about, Tyler mentioned it, is, ranchers have learned how to work with nature and recognize the importance of something like a healthy grassland, not just to the well-being of their cattle and themselves, but to the family business or to the business of ranching. The challenge, though, is that while we recognize how important taking care of the land and the soil is to a sustainable business model, many times it's not enough. And so we need to make sure that ranchers are well supported in those times where they are doing good stuff for the landscape, but they are challenged with the economic realities that happen in a cyclical business. And so we need to make sure that they're supported to keep them in a sustainable business model so that they don't have to take drastic measures and look at things like conversion. So I can go on and on, but I'll pass it on to Tyler because I'm sure he's got lots to say.
It's the curse of going last in this panel. I totally agree with both of your points. As numerous as they are, the scale of it is significant, and it's so nuanced. Really, the problem. What I would, I guess the last thing that I think is worthy to mention is my concern over the demographics of the industry. BSE in 2003 really removed a portion of our industry, of my generation of ranchers, and because it just wasn't economical, profitable to be in the business. And Tom, you made mention of the cyclical nature of ranching. I do have, over this 5, 10, even 15-year time horizon, I am actually very optimistic that the market signals are aligned with more positive biodiversity outcomes. But I do have great confidence that those ranchers that are still in place, they share the same view, the same motivation, and they value the biodiversity that exists today. So it's the concern over the shrinking numbers of actual individuals that are doing the work that concerns me a little bit. That's the only thing I'd like to add. Thanks.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I have scale. I love that everybody identified the problem, but quickly moved to solutions. So thank you for that. And to your point, Tyler, agreed, the demographics is something that is a worry. So we know, and we have some questions coming into the chat. So I have a couple more, and then we'll get to there's some really great questions actually in the Q&A. I think this group is obviously solutions focused. So what steps can we take to conserve the grasslands? And are there any success stories that you can share with participants on this webinar? As examples that can sort of inspire folks to move forward.
So I have a little bit of experience. I can cite a couple of programs that I think were really impactful in our operation to maintain. Now they're not native prairie, but it is tame pasture that is long-standing. That's been in and encourages a perennial grass stand to be in place for 10+ years, and that's a lot of the Ducks Unlimited programming. I live in an area that we call the prairie pothole country. So it's common to have a significant portion of our land made up of sloughs and wetlands that are phenomenal habitat, obviously, for ducks and all of the kind of aligning species of those groups. And what I'd like to say, there are numerous programs that really focus on that, but I think the critical thing is the concept, I think, is totally transferable to other habitats that are at risk. And one of the key attributes of it is starting with a shorter term time horizons. Sometimes it's a pretty big leap to make for a rancher to agree to change, agreeing to have their land in a certain use forever into perpetuity. And so programs that actually just support producers, ranchers, in a 3 to 5 year time horizon of that use, gets them thinking about and comfortable with that current use. And I think that's the way to kind of really make the entry into longer term that agreements that end up incentivizing ranching and having cattle on the landscape that, of course, has all of these added benefits.
Yeah, I might jump in for some program successes, and one of the things that we do at NCC, and one of the main tools we use, are conservation agreements or conservation easements with ranchers, which many people have taken up, but they're only one tool, and they do create conservation outcomes in perpetuity, and still the rancher still owns the land where we have a conservation easement on it. And that seems to work pretty well for many people, but it's not the only tool. And I would say maybe one of the greatest program successes, which we just accomplished this year with Ducks Unlimited Canada, was we partnered together to put a conservation easement in partnership with the McIntyre Ranch down in southern Alberta, which is now the largest conservation easement in Canadian history. But we wouldn't have been able to do that without partnership, of course, with the ranchers themselves, with the ranching family, but with Ducks Unlimited, because it was such a large ranch at 55,000 acres, pretty phenomenal grassland. And then we, of course, had support from the government of Alberta and the government of Canada to help support us, and then private donations from individuals and corporations who have helped us do that. So those are some great successes. And I would say, even though we're still trying to get this over the line, which I think is really, really the way to go, is the Canadian Cattle Association leading the way in their Grasslands Conservation Initiative, where Ducks Unlimited Canada and Nature Conservancy Canada are providing support to try to build a suite of programs, get creative, so that, yes, we can still use existing tools like conservation easements, but trying to figure out some other tools that can really help ranchers in their conservation initiatives. And that could be things like yearly conservation dividends, or financing programs that have sort of an environmental outcome attached to it. So helping in that succession. Tyler talked about succession planning is going to be a challenge. Can we create financial mechanisms that help young ranchers expand, or be able to purchase ranches from family members, etc., with perhaps support from NCC and Ducks Unlimited and low interest financing? Those types of ideas, I think, moving forward, are really going to help get some more conservation going. But again, it does need to be a whole of society partnership. It can't just be one organization or a couple organizations working together. It needs to be a lot of minds and a lot of support to be able to make this work.
I guess I could just add some government acronyms to some of the examples that were used already, because Environment Climate Change Canada has got lots of initiatives for various ecosystem conservation. But I think that the one that Tom was referring to might have been the Species at Risk Partnership on Agricultural Lands. The acronym is SARPAL. And it's been piloting innovative approaches to grassland and wetland conservation and species at risk recovery for the last 8 years. It's a novel approach. It's a voluntary approach, so it relies on people out in the sector, like you folks, to partner with the agriculture sector and recognize how important it is that we steward habitat. In addition to that, we've got a $1.4 billion Nature Smart Climate Solutions Fund, which is administered by Environment Climate Change Canada, and they're focused on conserving, restoring, and supporting climate smart management practices on all sorts of different ecosystem terrains like grasslands, wetlands, peatlands, and forests. We also support traditional forms of conservation. In my region, we've got Conservation Halton. We've got some grasslands, we've got some wetlands. I don't think we have peat, but we have lots of forests, and increasing the biodiversity of our natural ecosystem locally in Halton has been their main ambition. And it's tree planting, so it's very different than grasslands conservation, but I give them a shout out because they've planted 300,000 trees in the last couple of years. So it's pretty significant work on relatively small parcels of land in comparison to some of the 55,000 acre plots that we're talking about. So what's important is that there's an economy behind grassland conservation and conversion. And, I don't think any good government or any reasonable ambition can rely simply on charity or goodwill in a vacuum. It requires proactive sectors, it requires interested people, and it requires a willing government. And we're proud to be that willing government partner.
Excellent. Thank you all for your insights there. I think we do have some questions floating in, so I will ask this last question and then I'll turn to the chat. What is the role of policy and/or government in supporting grassland conservation? And what is the role of policy or government to influence the change?
I might just jump in and just following up from what Adam just said. I mean, the government of Canada, through programs like he mentioned, as well as the Natural Heritage Conservation Program, I mean, those are, I would say, key, maybe even essential to providing seed money, which is matched by private investment and private donations to ensure that these programs can get rolled out onto grasslands and into ranching businesses. I mean, it's so important to have that key investment, and conservation across Canada, and this investment has had a tremendous benefit to both ranchers and conserving biodiversity. So I think when we're thinking about other policy mechanisms, again, getting creative with how we can continue to incentivize, and that might not be through direct cash investments. It could be through things like tax credits or other types of financial mechanisms as well. I also think we have to think about perhaps unintended consequences of some policies that get placed out there that put unintended pressures on conversion or incentivize conversion without really realizing that it might incentivize conversion. One of the things that's driving up conversion right now is just the economics of farming. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think economics of farming, it's great that's happening, but we have to think about what policy and mechanisms do governments put in place that continue to move that balance that continues to support, or maybe not support, but have an adverse impact on conversion. So I think just thinking through certain policies and things that governments put in place where the intention might be there, but it could have the wrong impact on continued conversion.
Yeah, I would. That's exactly kind of where my mind went to as well, Tom. I think it's important to note when thinking about government's role in this, beyond, new programs or initiatives that, that may be enacted, I think it's also important to kind of be willing to tweak and adjust existing programs. And what I would cite, for example, are aspects of agri-stability and crop insurance in particular, that really does shift the risk-reward ratio of farming versus ranching on the landscape. I think that there has been some inequities on that, and I think that there's opportunities to improve that in order to I guess more level the playing field with respect to the risk reward components of each of these business enterprises.
So I'll try to be brief with my response on this one. There's basically 4 ways that I think the government can play a role and ought to play a role in these initiatives. Those are funding, which is the obvious one, but policy is a really important one, and that was raised. Our convening power is very important. We bring people to the table, but the last one, which is I think potentially the most important between funding, policy, and our convening power is our ability to work with partners directly, and build consensus and act as that facilitator between those different groups. So I was interested to know sort of what the main conversion from grassland is, and I know that in Ontario, at least, we've had a huge push towards housing in the hinterland, which is something that, like privately, maybe outside of my role in government, we pushed up against and actually got a little bit of a win out of, which is good, because I believe when you're building places for people to live, you don't need to entrench on nature in order to find places for people to live. I think people already live, in Canada pretty far apart in fairly, sparse neighborhoods, and we could learn if you've traveled a little bit to other countries, and you'll notice that people live in denser neighborhoods, and it makes things like public transit work a lot better. So I think, the ways that the government can be engaged are pretty obvious, but we need to continue to fine tune some of those things, particularly around like what policies and what funding programs, what convening opportunities, and how we facilitate those conversations, I think is really key.
Monica, if it's okay, I might just add one extra piece that I thought about as I've gotten more settled in my role here, and I think the other thing, completely agree with Adam as well, land use planning, and that's land use planning from a provincial, municipal, all government level. And, I'm thinking about this in the context of interspersed landscapes of natural habitat and farming. And, there's really good evidence to suggest the importance of natural ecosystems interspersed within farming product or farming systems, where it increases productivity due to the abundance of things like pollinators, for example. And so trying to work in municipalities and other various forms of government in land use planning, so that we have this interconnected mosaic of both natural landscapes and farming, which can benefit the productivity of farming at the same time. So you get the dual benefit again of biodiversity conservation, interconnected landscapes for larger animals, plus increased productivity in farming systems.
And lots of potential pathways identified there. So thank you all for that. I'm going to take one question from the participants of this webinar, and I think it's one that is a broader conversation globally, and that's what from your perspective, what is the role of credit unions, banks, and other financial institutions in reducing biodiversity loss and mitigating climate change impacts. So anybody have any thoughts that they want to share on that before we head to closing comments?
I don't mind just chiming in, and I just provide a sort of proviso at the beginning. This is sort of my personal opinion more so than it is maybe a government one. But banks make decisions every day about what they're going to invest in. And, whether that's sort of through some of their more corporate social responsibility endeavors or directly in their pooled fund allocations, banks are making choices and they will react to public pressure. So I think we need to continually put pressure on people making those decisions to say, hey, these are our priorities. I believe in a triple bottom line foundation for what we're trying to achieve as a society. It's not all just driven by profit. It shouldn't just be driven by, where's the growth going to happen in the economy. It's also got to be driven by what we want to see in terms of outcomes, what type of planet we want to build, and the fact that we need to support people. And ultimately, we're talking about food here. Like we're talking about the availability and access of to local food. Certainly, we're talking about more than just food, but it's been top of mind for Canadians because food's gotten too expensive in Canada, and we want Canadians to be able to consume food that's grown and produced here in Canada. And I don't necessarily hear about that from the banking sector very often, but I know it's top of mind for most of my constituents. So.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Parliamentary Secretary. Anybody else want to jump in before we shift gears?
Oh, Tyler, I think is on mute.
Sorry. Really quickly, I think that there could be a role. The counterpoint is that so reliant on on financial institutions, the agriculture is in general, but in particular ranchers, and so it raises a risk to me that if we're not able to relay the alignment of biodiversity and ranching in the way that we know it to be to our financial institutions, what effects are we going to have to deal with? So the optimist of me says, I think the general public, and as part of that, financial institutions will come along with understanding the importance of grasslands. And so I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess, about that and their future role.
Yeah, Tyler talked about succession, and I think there's a key role that financial institutions can play in succession and the transfer of land, either from one generation to another, or to, if a young rancher is looking to expand their ranch and purchase land from a neighbor or something like that. I think there's a mechanism there that perhaps financial institutions could consider, something like very low interest mortgages if there's an agreement that land will be maintained for biodiversity and conservation, as well as sustaining the ranching business. So could you go in partnership to get low interest long-term mortgages for that transfer to the next generation? I think there's a mechanism there that I think I would hope that our financial institutions would consider seriously.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we're almost at time. This session has really, really flown by. Thank you for the wonderful insights. I do want to close the panel and with your optimistic words for the future. I know some of you mentioned what you're optimistic about, but in the context of our discussion today, what are you most optimistic about looking to the next 15 years? And we'll start with Tom and then over to Tyler, and then we'll wrap up with the Parliamentary Secretary.
Sure. Thanks, Monica. And we are faced, of course, with this challenge of grassland loss. And I think I kind of said it before. I think the word is out about grasslands across Canada, which are getting people, the public, governments, us, private individuals, corporations, others very interested and recognizing that this is a challenge. And I think we have the whole of society approach in place where I think many people will be interested in participating in conserving grasslands across Canada. And across the Northern Great Plains. I mean, even international recognition of the importance of temperate grasslands across the globe. So I am optimistic. We can plan for 2026, the International Year of the Rangelands and Pastoralists. I think that's coming up. That will be exciting. I think the word will continue to get out, and I think we'll just see a lot of interest and support for grassland conservation across the Canadian prairies. I'm pretty excited. And then partnerships. We're coming together because we've all recognized we can't do this alone. We can do a part, but we certainly can't do it alone.
Thank you, Tom. Tyler.
Yeah, I'd say probably the thing that I'm most optimistic about it is a change in society's kind of perception of and value of nature. I think there's a new appreciation for nature post-COVID than what there was previously, and so that really buoys me, that with more and more individuals getting out into those natural places, I think they can't help but appreciate it more. And as long as society's values are aligned with those of ranchers, which I think that's the trend, there's good reason that we'll be able to figure out ways to maintain the natural spaces that we have.
I'll take just a slightly different angle, I suppose, just for the sake of a broad conversation. The week before last, I did 3 school visits, and I'll say, that most of the kids that attended the 3 schools that I went to are urban kids. They live in homes and with pools in the backyard and townhomes throughout the area. So if they've been to a ranch, then it was for a visit, most likely. But the number of times that questions arise about how can we save our planet, what about the hinterland, like how can I be a climate change advocate or warrior, was really heartening. Kids really care about our planet. I got Owl magazine when I was a kid. I watched The Nature of Things. And actually the other day I was on a call with a woman and she introduced herself, and we were talking about this platform for kids to learn a little bit more about the planet, and she told me that she invented Owl magazine. So I had a real wow moment where I thought I was, I'm sitting across the screen here from a real celebrity. But kids have taken it a step farther, and they really, really want to get involved. And I think the more we can continually reach out to kids who live in urban environments and tell them they have a role to play, that their planet is under threat, their country is under threat, and biodiversity is under threat, they'll get involved. I'm just really heartened and confident about our future because the kids that I get to interact with, I tell them all the time, you don't have a vote, but you do have a voice. So tell me what your ideas are, and I'll make sure the Prime Minister hears from you directly. And those are always really, really confidence building exercises for me, because the kids have good ideas, and if they keep those ideas up, then I think the planet will be in good shape.
Excellent way to wrap us up, Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you so much. I know we took a few more minutes. I'm sorry to the organizers, but it was just such a great conversation. I appreciate everyone's thoughtful insights and really identifying the challenges and the pathways to collaborative success. So we will now take a very short break, a couple of minutes. Please do whatever you need to do, fill up your coffees, etc. And we'll see you in a couple of minutes. We're going to start promptly. So run downstairs and grab your coffee, or run to the office, to the kitchen and grab a coffee, and then we'll see you soon. Thank you so much to our panelists and to our participants who asked really great questions. We'll try and follow up with you one-on-one just so we can get those answers to you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.